fangirls and fanboys. Welcome to another episode of Random Fandom, the podcast that celebrates fan culture in all its glory. And we would like to say Shana Tova, a Happy New Year to our Jewish friends and our friends everywhere. Shana Tova, Chen.
Shana Tova, Shiri.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm enjoying the holiday season and I'm doing great.
I'm getting excited for Comic-Con New York, which is happening in
coming up.
10 days. Though by the time we post this episode, it will be way closer. But either way, it's super close.
Yeah. Well, we have a super exciting show today. We're going to do our little roundup at the beginning. We're going to talk about what's been going on in fandoms. And then we're going to have an amazing interview that we had with one Miss Lauren Eggert-Crowe. She runs the Twitter and Tumblr account Sunnydale
Hamilton in Sunnydale.
Hamilton in Sunnydale, indeed, which is a mashup of those two amazing things. Hamilton, the musical, and Sunnydale, which is Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Of course. She's our very first guest, so that's very exciting.
Yeah, and she was a delightful guest and very, very interesting, fascinating person. And so I'm sure you all will enjoy it. But before we get there, Chen, tell us a little bit about what's been happening.
All right, so we have a few things, not a lot. One of the coolest things that we're really happy about is, if you remember the whole story about whitewashing, we talked about on a previous episode, discussing Hellboy and the vacant role that was left and hopefully intended for an actor from a Japanese descent. So now Daniel Day Kim is actually taking over. Yeah. Just a little summary, if you recall, Ed Skrein was cast in that role, and after some internet mayhem, he did some research. He saw that the character was of Japanese descent. He quit the production and said that he doesn't feel like in good conscience he can do that. And it was published around September 11th that Daniel Day Kim is going to replace him, which was amazing because Daniel Day Kim was actually a series regular, if I'm not mistaken, on Hawaii 5-0. And he actually quit the show, and he was not the only one. But the whole thing was that they weren't offered a big a salary as their non-Asian co-stars. So they pretty much gave production an ultimatum, and they ended up quitting because, production would not pay them more. So it's just
amazing.
Yeah, and that's relatively recent as well. So I just like to see how, it's
just being kind of done.
Yeah, it's a story with a good end, and now I'm way more excited to see Hellboy, to be honest with you.
And we'll just to say that this guy, we know him from Lost, was on Lost. And before that, he was on Angel for a couple of seasons. That's where I know him from and loved him. And he's a very good-looking man.
And a great actor.
And he has very good presence, on screen. And the fact that they were not being paid as much as the other co-stars is just outrageous. And I thought only women got this, treated this badly. But there's no limits to...
No, there aren't.
This is very good news, very exciting.
Yes, another thing that I personally get really excited about, and you might be as well. So Moomin, which I grew up watching as a kid, but it's a European, it's a European creation, is getting a film, an animated film that will come out in 2019. And the cast is insane. You have Rosamund Pike, you have Kate Winslet. It's crazy. We will link it so you can see all the announcements. But, some very big names are involved with it. And I'm very excited because I think in America, they don't know Moomin very well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not an American thing. I believe if I ask most people here, unless, they're very invested in, fairy tales and,
well, for those who don't know what it is, how would you describe these books?
I've never read the books. I've only seen the series growing up, but it's I know.
When I was a kid, the Moomin books. Loved it. It was one of the first things that I read, on my own, chose the books, took him home to read and felt very grown up about it. And something that happened in these books blew my mind as a kid, because the writer used to write that character of Moomin as if he is sitting by her side while she's writing, and she's sort of talking to him in the beginning, or sometimes in the afterwards of the story. You know, she's writing and he's kind of sitting there and he's asking things like a child would, and she answers. And I was like, my tiny mind was, wait a minute, does that mean that he's real? This white little potato creature is real?
That's actually
What
charming.
does that mean about what I just read?
Yeah, you know, I remember it as like on occasion scary because some of these characters were terrifying, but charming.
Situations also.
Right, you know, teaching you like good values with a cast of like diverse characters. Some of them are animals, some of them you're not sure what they are. One of them is human. Well, two of them. Yeah, these are exciting news for me personally, and it seems like for you as well.
I hope that the animation style is it's sort of like the series, because otherwise it would suck, I think.
I think it will look a bit more modern, but probably not in like a heartbreaking way. You know what I mean? We will post the link so you can look at some of the suggestions or whatever. But you know, just thinking about that cast, I'm very excited.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
What else? What else? So speaking of, you know, things that are getting the film treatment, there is a graphic novel series that is very popular among especially like bisexual lesbian women, but it's called Strangers in Paradise. And it actually portrays the story of this love triangle between two female best friends, and another man who walks into their lives. And, you know, it's a huge hit, been read by tons of people. It's by Terry Moore. And now it's gonna get the film treatment, and the person who's gonna direct it is Angela Robinson, who's currently directed Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman, which is the origin story of how Wonder Woman was created, which I don't know how much you know about it, but it's a fascinating story on its own.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Basically, ages ago, like a man who had like a mistress and a wife, but the wife and the mistress were always also sort of together, and he based this character on the two strong women in his life, and you know, it's fascinating. But I love Strangers in Paradise. I'm very glad that it's, you know, we'll get to see it on the screen. So that's another thing to look forward to. And you know, what else is interesting? We discussed the Millennium saga, I believe a couple episodes ago, remember, or like maybe when we talked about Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, how when, you know, someone dies...
We did, yeah.
Yeah, when someone dies, someone else picks up. So this happens with the Millennium saga because the author died and the rights were given to another author who wrote like a fourth book in this saga, The Girl in the Spider Web. And it was announced on September 15th that Claire Foy, whom I actually love, she's the lead on The Crown. She plays the queen on The Crown, and she's great. But it was announced that she's gonna play Elizabeth Salinger in a movie version of that book. And, you know, I'm very torn about it because we talked about this. You know, first of all, I haven't read that book because it's not by the same author, so I don't even know how to feel about that. But there was the Swedish versions of the films, and they've done all three books with the Swedish cast. And then they started doing the trilogy here in the US, and Rooney Mara starred as Elizabeth Salinger in the very first film. And they actually never continued. They've only done the first out of the three. So all of a sudden, they're doing a film based on that fourth book. They're recasting, basically. But I like this actress, so I'm very torn about it. So it'd be interesting to...
You're skeptic about if it's going to be good or not?
You know, I don't even know if I want to see it because I didn't even read the book. In a way, it's not the source material. It's not the same actress. It's complicated, but I'll be interested to see how other people react to it. I will probably go see Claire Foy because I like to support her work, but, you know, I'm a bit torn about it. So I love how everything connects to things we've spoken about before, of course. The last thing I actually wanted to discuss or mention on this roundup is that Gregg, whom I love, who plays Coulson on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is gonna direct his first episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. next season.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I always like seeing, when actors were like, hey, I actually want to, like, maybe get out of my comfort zone, try something new, and that production lets its people try new things. And actually, this week it was Gina Rodriguez from Jane the Virgin tweeted that she's going to direct an episode of Jane this season.
Nice.
I like it when it happens. And this concludes my roundup for today. Is there anything you want to mention?
Not really. I'll just briefly mention, because I don't want to go into it too much because we have plans for this later on. The amazing fanfiction website, Archive of Our Own. This huge archive of fanfiction of every fandom you can think of. And I've been a member of it for a very long time. On my fics are there. And I love it there. And I think they're very much... They came from fandom and they know what
Yeah, I also have published works over there.
Yeah. So this month they've celebrated their 10-year anniversary. So just wanted to mention that and give a big kudos to them.
Yeah.
And if I want to give them another kudos, I can't, because I've already given a kudos on this.
That's a very niche joke, but I get it.
If you've been to Archive of Our Own, you know what I mean. You're always left with all these, but I want to leave more kudos. I want more love for this fic. No, you can't. You've done it once.
Well, it's as far as I could tell, it wasn't just archives. It's like OT3, OTW?
TW, Transformative Works. This organization thinks that, the whole fandom culture should be preserved, rights should go to the people who make the fan works, and they protect fans and their work, be it fan fiction, video, whatever.
They do a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah. And we'll delve into that much deeper in later shows. We plan to talk about them at length, but not today. Just wanted to give them a shout out because I really love it there.
All right, I think it's time for our main story.
Yeah. So like I said, very exciting, an interview with Lauren, and we spoke about many things, and so let's go there.
So for our main story of today, we actually have been thinking a lot about fandom crossovers, which is, I think, one of the best expressions for fandom love, because if you love one thing and you love another thing very much, you usually try to see how they work together.
They match together.
Right.
You know that little thrill you get when you watch the show you love and they mention the other show you love?
Yes.
And you jump up and down on the couch and you go, oh my God!
Some
so we want to extend that.
Yeah, some shows go very meta with it, like Community and Cougar Town used to always joke about one another, and it was such a thrill. And it's something you always see on Tumblr, like, they'll take GIFs from, like, or GIFs or whatever from shows that you really like, but they will paste dialogue from another show.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I can read those all day.
And
well, depending on the fandom, of course.
Right, and you've done something that falls under that category in Israel, right?
Yeah, I did do that a bunch of years ago, but like in a bigger scale. We used to be, I think we spoke about this before briefly, the Israeli community is very creative. It was for a long while. And a few years ago, we made a video, like an hour-long video, that was like a parody of The Office. We were obsessed with the American Office at the time. And Angel, the series, because we were, of course, obsessed with Angel. And one time we were sitting around just friends, and kind of talking to each other, and we noticed that there's some correlations between the characters, like Angel could be Michael, and so on. And then we wrote this entire comedy, an hour comedy, and we shot it. It's, it's very basic fan stuff, but even if I say so myself, it's hilarious. I was one of the writers, and I was the director, and it was the whole thing. We scouted for locations, we did casting, and it was so much fun. I still get a kick out of it. I still think it's hilarious. And the thrill of...
Oh, I agree. I saw it.
Yeah, I know. What do you think about it? Do you like it?
I liked it. I mean, it was called Angel a Day in the
All right.
Office.
I used to call it Angel while at the office.
While at the office.
I don't know why, I just like it.
I liked it a lot. And then a couple years back, there was this production called the Crossover Games, which was like an episode of The Big Brother, but containing characters from like different fandoms. I even had a cameo. So we were trying to think who would be a good guest, someone to talk to about this phenomenon we call fandom crossovers. And one of mine, and I think your favorite Twitter accounts these days, is Hamilton in Sunnydale, or Sunnydale Ham. It's ran by Lauren Eggert-Crowe. Did I butcher your name, or did I manage?
No, you got it perfectly right.
Yes. Hi, and we have her with us today. How exciting.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
We're very happy to have you. And I was trying to read a bit about you. You're a poet, but we'll be happy if you'll tell us a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So yes, I live in Los Angeles. I am a poet and writer and essayist. I joke that I write pretty much everything but fiction because I've written all of that. I've done poetry, essays, book reviews, interviews. Wow. I've done some food writing. I did write fiction when I was younger, and we'll get into that with all of the fan fiction that I've written over the years. Yeah, and I've just always been a pretty obsessive person about the things that I get into, so this seemed to be a very natural extension of that tendency that I have.
And you also published a feminist magazine, right?
Yeah, so I wrote zines when I was in my teen years and my 20s. I had a zine called Galatea's Pants for about 11 years that was all about feminism, and it became pretty political in the early 2000s, but it was also sort of just a hodgepodge, eclectic zine.
I miss zines.
I miss zines too. They're still around. I feel like they're never really going to die.
But it's nice. Print and everything print is sort of like now a dinosaur being extinct. No one would actually make a zine now. They'll just make something online, right? Everything's there.
Like there's definitely still a big zine trend among countercultures, alternative cultures. If you go to like an anarchist collective or an autonomous space or a women's center or even like a little locally run coffee shop, there's always going to be a little zine library. Because there's something about holding something tangible that people still really respond to. We still seem to really like the printed matter, which is nice.
Yeah, no, I'm always torn because I have a Kindle and I think it's very practical. It's good for my back, first of all, because if you read something like Lord of the Rings, it's great to have it in like a notebook size. It's good for the environment, but every now and then I go on like a binge of buying hard copies or whatever, like printed, editions of stuff, and it's just nothing can really replace it. I mean,
yeah, it's true.
So you used to make zines that were very political at the time?
Yes, I would say so. Around the start of the Iraq War, during the Bush administration years, which were pretty bleak years, although
in contrast to now. Yeah.
But it was still really bad back then too. I wrote a lot of anti-war stuff, a lot of feminist writing, a lot of pro-labor, anti-corporate conglomerate, anti environmental degradation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the heavy stuff.
Yes, but then lots of silly things too. I was always kind of this mix of very polemic and also kind of random and eccentric.
Do you consider yourself a fangirl?
I think so. I mean, I've heard some interesting critiques of that word. Some people say it's diminutive, and I totally see that critique. But I mean, I think I'm a fangirl about a lot of things. It's very easy for me to become very obsessed and into a piece of art or culture or media and kind of want to just consume everything about it. So yeah, I would say that description fits me pretty well. I'm pretty eclectic in my fangirlhoods, though. I've been a fangirl about many different things, and I tend to go through cycles of what I'm a fan of.
Let's name some. I'm always so interested in what people gravitate to and they fall for.
Well, when I was really young, probably my first big fandom was Phantom of the Opera when I was 9 to
Oh yeah, big
12.
fandom.
Yes, and I definitely wrote some Phantom fan fiction.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And I read Phantom fan fiction, and I read like popular novelizations of the story. I was also really into Jurassic Park, which I wrote fan fiction for as well. So you can tell we're definitely in like 1993 here.
That is pretty eclectic, going from like Phantom to Jurassic Park.
Yes. Yeah, and then I had a huge obsession with the King Arthur legends for a very long time after reading The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley.
I'm gonna use it as a reference because, I also am very between like Spamalot, but a lot of other stuff, all of like this period pieces on TV. I'm very intrigued by that period and like all the Ken Follett books and stuff. And, just doing a bit of research, I saw that there was never like one book because it's like English fairy tales. There is no one origin. So it's very good that you just mentioned that book because I'm going to go and check it.
It's great. I mean, I really got into it. And then I had a huge obsession with Wicca and paganism for a long time because of that. And then that seeped into some of my fan fiction. So, and in more recent years, definitely Buffy and The West Wing when I was in high school and college. I was really obsessed with.
Which Lynn is also
Hunger
obsessed
Games
with.
For a little bit. Oh, nice. Awesome.
Do you know that? I mean, Lynn, he always like quotes, right, and his final performance on Broadway, the orchestra actually played the opening theme of The West Wing to kind of like bid him adieu with that.
I know. Yeah, that was so sweet. Yeah. Well, and then there's a West Wing Hamilton crossover account also that is really popular.
Well, that's easy because a lot of West Wing got into Hamilton, including a very quote that's actually there.
Yeah, a couple quotes.
I just love that.
Yeah.
Did you have we are veering off the subject, but this is my, my jam. Did you have a favorite pairing at the West Wing?
Oh, like a couplehood, you mean?
A ship, if you will.
Oh, a ship? Yeah, so, I mean, back in those days, I was really shipping hard for Josh and Donna.
Yes.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
Yes.
Of course, but it's interesting because watching it now, I'm like, what was I thinking? He treats her so terribly.
So bad. And she follows him around like a puppy.
No, it's just right. And it's just she's supposed to like take that as a sign of affection that he's just totally an asshole to her.
Even when he realizes that he's into her, that he's in love with her, he still drags it out and does nothing.
Yeah.
It's really hard to watch something you love a few years later or like, a decade later even and be like, oh, my perspective on this thing is totally different now and I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah, that's happened to me with several shows that I was into in the 2000s or movies and then rewatching them now thinking, wow, God, why did I like that character? Why did I like that guy? Why did I think he was good for this person?
Sometimes actually it makes me scared of like watching something that I used to love because there's always the fear of it being ruined for you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of like a never meet your idol. Just leave it where it is. So you don't know all the not so feminist things that went into the West Wing. Like I'm watching it now and every third sentence I cringe like, oh no.
Well, people say Sorkin has a general issue with writing for women.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think of all the things that I've seen that he has written, CJ was his best woman character, and so much of that is just due to Allison Janney's amazing acting.
That's so true. Yeah.
It's weird because you always write these characters that have the potential of being like really strong. Like in the newsroom, there's Sloane, and she's great. But if you start to dig like under the surface, you find all these like, oh, something is not entirely right. I still love his work very much, but it seems like in general he's not always in tune with what's happening in Hollywood.
Yeah, I think that's true.
West Wing watching it now, a lot of workplace sexual harassment. A
Yes.
lot, like
Oh my
everywhere.
god. It's
So much.
it's unbelievable.
Your favorite characters just they say the things that make me. Okay, so that was The West Wing.
This is becoming
Yes.
super depressing. Great.
No, it's not depressing. I think it's good. Like
It's depressing and educational.
just the other day, my sister and I were watching, a bit of West Wing that just came our way, and I told her, but listen, look how we cringe, and this was like 17 years ago. How long was that? So that means there was some sort of movement forward, because even less than 20 years ago, we will not accept today on TV what was like stellar 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's kind of optimistic.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, there's definitely there's a little bit more awareness now, perhaps.
Yeah, we have no choice but have awareness today, which is great. I mean, the movement is definitely slow, but it's not non-existent. So that's good, especially looking back at the Emmys last week. Wow. That was, I think, the most diverse award ceremony in the last decade, which was great. Yeah, but actually, let's talk about the Twitter account. We love it.
Thank you.
It's a
Absolutely love it.
yeah. I think I retweet like probably 70% of what you do.
Nice.
And of course, it also got attention from all sorts of people. So, how did you come up with the idea to do that?
So I guess one part of my fandom personality is that I'm always kind of doing crossovers. Back when I was a teenager, I had a renewed obsession with Star Wars, but also with like Wicca and the Mists of Avalon, and I wrote some like crossover fan fiction with those two fandoms in mind. I've done West Wing and Weedsy Bat fan fiction, which is still out there on the internet somewhere. So I'm just always, I think because I really like story and I'm a writer and I can get really invested in characters, I always tend to see similarities and overlap between certain characters' arcs and moral dilemmas and emotional themes. So I don't remember how exactly it started, but I started listening to Hamilton a year and a half ago, just nonstop, and was I adored the lyrics and adored the music, and I just thought it was incredible. But in the same time, I was always watching Buffy, and so I just started I would think of some of the scenes from Buffy would just remind me of Hamilton lyrics, and and I always kind of wanted to be that kind of person that created popular memes. So one night I was just like, I'm going to start this Tumblr and see how long I can keep it up for. So I think the first one I thought of, the very first one that came to me was the very final scene in The Gift, where all of the characters they've just discovered that Buffy has died, and it's like Giles at the forefront, and the lyric from Hamilton is, "Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control who lives, who dies, who tells your story." And another reason I thought of that is because Glory is then the villain in that episode. So
all right,
that's kind of where that came from. In some ways, I was also, I love that season, I was just primed to listen to whenever I heard a song that had the word glory in it. I was like, ooh, how can I make this relate to Buffy?
That's so smart. I didn't even think about it. That's so true.
Yeah.
And I mean, now that you've seen the show, just recently, this past week.
I did. I saw it a couple days ago, and it was
right.
incredible. It was such an amazing experience.
So you also know, that scene from The Gift, the famous picture of her lying down and everybody surrounds her, is kind of the same staging, in quotation marks, of that final scene in Hamilton when they're all stepping forward to sing their lines. So now when you're talking about it, I'm like, oh my god, there's just more and more levels to that. That's amazing.
Yes. Well, there's so many. What I love about both of these pieces of media is they both have characters that you can really invest in, who are noble and flawed and ambitious and make really terrible decisions, but also make incredible sacrifices. You have characters who are grappling with big questions of love and their future and death and grief and family and community and what their responsibility to the world is. And I feel like pretty much every character in Hamilton, you could find some line that they say that matches up with the character in the Buffyverse. Because
This reminds me of what Joss Whedon said when he wrote What's More with Feelings. He always used to say, well, the emotions are so high, in Buffy. They are like a moment away from opening their mouths and singing anyway. They're like a bit away from being a musical anyway. So that is kind of like that. It's so emotional. It's so big. Everything is so life and death.
Yes.
And you get the same feelings in Hamilton.
Yes, absolutely.
And
And
all their personal little struggles echo in the big picture of, starting this nation.
mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
it kind of feels the same way with Buffy. The stakes are always very high. It's always like the world, the universe is on the line, not just your little relationship with your vampire boyfriend.
Right. And also, I mean, one thing that I kind of always keep in mind is that both of these shows happen during a war. I mean, Buffy is pretty much constantly at war. And so any quote from Hamilton about war is going to apply to Buffy characters, because they are always fighting a war against darkness and demons and hell. And often it seems like things might be at peace or at a standstill, but she kind of has to always be vigilant. And that does interesting things to all of the characters.
Well, hearing everything you say, I'm just like now upset that there's like no scene in Hamilton during which he gets like a class protector umbrella or anything like it.
Or so.
Instead, he was really recognized after his death, which is interesting because like nowadays, until the musical, he was one of the least familiar characters in the American history, the one that was in a way groomed to be the president but never got to do that. And so it's interesting that while he was alive, he was this annoyance to a lot of people because he was so stubborn. And then after his death, he was recognized for all his achievements. And then again, throughout the years, he was forgotten again. It's interesting. And of course, the whole reincarnation theme doesn't necessarily exist in Hamilton, but there is a sense of like when one big figure dies, someone else has to pick up from and continue from when the last one left off. From where?
Absolutely. Yes, and I think both shows deal with how do we live with the ever-present threat of death? How does that change the way we live our lives? And what do we do when we lose someone whose figure looms so large in our consciousness?
Yeah. And there's a contrast there because, like, he was constantly afraid of dying and constantly speaking about his legacy. And Buffy's like, meh, I've like, dying is not a big deal anymore. Like,
right. Yeah, she died so many times.
And he was always trying to he wanted the legacy. So he made the work. He created the work. He had to write more. He had to do more. Buffy, her struggle was always, no, I'm going to be a real girl, just a normal girl. I'm going to walk around in the world. I'm going to, be a cheerleader and hang with my friends, and I'll go to the club and I'll shop and sneeze,
Yes.
And in that way, they're very different.
Except for the end, though.
She wanted that mantle, and she didn't.
Because at the very end, though, she changed the world's order. She's done something that was empowering for, like...
Yeah, the world turned upside down.
Yeah, there we go. I think we found the next tweet. Yes.
I have to tell you, this Twitter account changed the way I listen to Hamilton. And I listen to Hamilton a lot. Like, everyone does. If you start to listen to Hamilton,
so do I.
You basically can't stop. So you go around months and months just listening to it obsessively and trying to wrap all the words.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm doing pretty well with that. But it just changed the way I experience this, because all I do now is when I get stuck on a line that I used to tell myself, man, that line is so good. Now I say, how does this apply to Buffy?
Yes, my work is done.
Absolutely. And I kept telling myself, you have to send that over.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I never do because I'm lazy. But I want you to know that it's in my heart and my brain all the time.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear. That's basically how I listen to Hamilton too now. Like when I think I'm tapped out, and when I think I can't possibly think of any more combinations, I'll listen to Hamilton
there's so much.
And then hear, oh my God, I need to do that one. I need to do that one. How come I can't believe I didn't think of this one before? So
how do you keep track of all of it? Do you remember everything you've done?
Well,
so you won't do it again?
I actually am surprised I haven't repeated one yet, because I have over 300 posts.
Oh,
now.
wow.
I guess right now I'm just relying on my memory, but I might have to come up with another system at some point.
Do you feel like it became like a task? Is there a burden to it? Does it feel like work on occasion, or not really?
Well, there's a little bit of work. If I try to never miss a day on Tumblr, so when I know that I don't have any posts queued up for the next couple days, there's a part of me that's like, oh crap, I have to get this done because I don't want the blog to go dark for a day. I think that I probably could be working harder at it. There are people that have accounts like this who do a lot more work to promote it and interact with all the other Twitter followers. And I feel like I could be doing more to like make it more more well known. I'm still trying to get Lin-Manuel Miranda to see it. Maybe he will at some point.
Will, I have faith.
So what was like a good moment, experience, like for you doing this, working this account?
I mean, probably, so there was the day that it all happened in one day. Joss Whedon and Sarah Michelle Gellar both retweeted it, which was pretty amazing.
Wow.
Do you remember which one? Do you remember which one it was?
Yeah, so Joss retweeted the scene of Buffy in Prophecy Girl with the quote, "I imagine death so much it feels more like a memory." And then Sarah Michelle Gellar, later that day, retweeted this scene, which is like my favorite scene. It's she and Dawn are on the tower, and Buffy has just realized that she has to sacrifice herself to save Dawn and save the world. And they both have this like beautiful glowing light on them. And I have the line from Angelica, "I love my sister more than anything in this life. I will choose her happiness over mine every time."
That's so beautiful. I remember that.
And so that's the one. Sarah
The
Michelle
hairs on my forearm are standing. Ooh. Sure.
Oh. But it's like, yeah, I mean, they're both shows about sisters who love each other and have been through so much together, and there's a lot you can work with.
I always felt like Eliza is honestly the real star of the show. It's her story.
Well, the show ends with the spotlight just on her.
Yeah, exactly. This is the moment when you're like, oh, this is her story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's very much the hero of the show because she is the reason why we even know as much about Hamilton as we do. She did so much work to transcribe all of his writing and interview the people that were part of his life. I mean, yeah, she did a lot of work.
She had to endure him in a way.
Yes.
And she had to forgive him, and she had to give him the space to come to his full potential in a way. So without her, really, you would not achieve, I think, half of what he achieved.
Yeah.
So very much like the fact.
I think that's absolutely.
Yeah. And
I
it's
think the
interesting.
modern Eliza would kick his ass out of the house. Of course, she didn't in history because that was a different time. But think of these brilliant women just going to waste over there. This really always kind of bugs me. And Angelica and her brilliance, she has opinions, political. She also is a driving force behind him, according to the show.
Absolutely.
And Well, that's their job, to be the driving force, to make sure everything is okay in the home front and give ideas and be like muses.
Yeah.
And then the men that get sent to the world to do the
Right,
thing.
and then you have like
Yeah.
a modern variation with someone like Lynn who comes and says, in my show, in the show I do, I'm gonna acknowledge the fact that without this woman, this man would have been nothing, you know?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
find it really interesting that the two tweets you mentioned that Sarah and Joss tweeted were more on the emotional side than on the like witty, funny side. It's an interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I like about doing the blog is they're not all supposed to be funny. Like I like doing the funny ones, but I make some of them to really get people in the heart. And I've definitely gotten a lot of responses of, "Oh my God, you're killing me. How could you do this to me?" You know,
Absolutely.
"You're so rude. How dare you?"
I believe I myself had a hand in that at some point. Like, I don't remember the tweet, but I remember very vividly tweeting something like, either too soon, maybe it was like something with Tara, or like, how dare you, you know, that's not okay. I love when it just makes you, like, you get so involved and so invested. It's amazing. This is
Yeah.
That's the power of those crossovers, those mashups that you're talking about. Because those are two separate fandoms, kind of have nothing in common, but we as fans, as people, we mash them together, we make something even more amazing. And I guess a person who never watched Buffy or doesn't really know Hamilton will not get it. They will not understand why this is so emotional for us or so hilarious. It's our little corner of the world where we play around in our sandbox, and it's such a delight. The mashups are just something that as fans it's like finding fan fiction and realizing you can do whatever you want with these characters the way you do in your head anyway. So you can make it, you can write it down and people will.
It's like it's like an equation that's a process of elimination, because you're like, oh, you like Hamilton, oh, that's really cool. Oh wait, everybody who follows this account loves Hamilton and Buffy. These are my people, you know?
Very specific subset of the population.
And yet it's not at all surprising how much people love both. Maybe it's just about people with good taste. I don't know.
I mean, I would say in general, someone that likes Hamilton and likes Buffy has good taste.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. It's all thanks.
Just like recording ourselves, complimenting ourselves. No big deal.
Right.
You talked about, writing fan fiction in the past and like always wanting to be like the cool person who does like the memes, but is that like your first actual like shot at doing something crossover-y publicly?
Yeah, that got this much attention, definitely. I mean, I was really big on the West Wing message board. Well, not big as in popular, but I was very active on the West Wing message boards 17 years ago. And some people read my fan fiction, and I had like a decent amount of reading of my zines, which had some fan stuff in there, but this is definitely the thing that has gotten the most, like has the biggest platform. Like I think the Tumblr has 2,000 followers now. Which is like, that's very validating and very flattering. It's fun. It's fun to do something and to know, oh, people are responding to this. People, I don't just have a weird brain. Other people like this stuff too.
It's either we all have weird brains together, or I think we're just fine, Do you feel like there's more like traffic, lack of a better word, or like participation on Tumblr or on Twitter? Because to be honest, and Shiri was right. She was like referring to the Tumblr, and I was like, what? It's not a Tumblr, it's a Twitter account. So,
Yeah, we had this moment where I was talking about a Tumblr account. She was talking about a Twitter account. We were both right. We were getting it in different platforms.
So I think there's probably more traffic on the Tumblr. It has more followers, and it's kind of built for that interaction too. Just Twitter's algorithm is sneaky. So, I mean, there's decent interaction on every post on both Tumblr and Twitter, but like just because of how easy it is to reblog and quote and like on Tumblr, it seems to get a little bit more attention for each post that I do there.
And Tumblr is very fandom.
It is. And it's very image-based, too, whereas Twitter isn't so much.
It's a visual platform. She and I were actually talking about it because when she just joined Tumblr, she was like, she's like, what is this thing? I don't entirely, it doesn't click for me. Right, but I was like, you know what? Tumblr today, I feel like, is the most fandom-oriented place. And it's a visual platform, which for me, I think is my favorite thing. You know what I mean? Like something that you consume that way. So
yeah. You know, think of it as a continuously updating coffee table book.
That's true.
That's kind of how I think of Tumblr.
Yeah, or like your never-ending scrapbook.
Yeah. Well, one of the inspirations that I had for the layout of my Tumblr and just the screenshots was there was this great Tumblr blog for a while called Text from the Whedonverse, which took texts from last night and paired them up with screenshots from all of the different Joss Whedon productions, and that was hilarious. That was like one of my favorite blogs to read, and so I took some inspiration from that in how I set mine up.
There's also a lot of incorrect quotes on Tumblr, a lot of in different fandoms, but there are incorrect Buffy quotes. Also hilarious.
I've seen some of those. They're pretty funny.
So funny. They take from everywhere and just apply it to... They're doing like this Fade Buffy whole thing right now, and everything sounds amazing.
Nice.
Tumblr is like the gift that keeps on giving as long as your Flash player is not crashing, basically.
Yes.
I'll tell you what my thing with Tumblr is, and that's why I was having a lot of trouble with. I started in on Tumblr because when I came back into fandoms a couple of years ago and I started writing fanfiction, and I didn't think that would ever happen again, I went to the places where last time I was there, when I was writing Firefly fanfiction.
Nice.
You know, everyone... Yeah, and they're good, so check them out.
I will. I'll look for them.
Say so myself. I was writing, everything was on LiveJournal, and it was a great platform for fanfiction, for groups of fandoms. I loved it there. I go away for like 10 years and everything changes. And I was like, well, this is ridiculous.
Well, that's true about like everything nowadays. Like, can you imagine like, you know, checking in on technology 10 years from now after like a...
Of course. I was very naive. But the thing is, when I discovered that everything is on Tumblr is no good for fanfiction. It's not a good place to write. You can't have a real discussion in the comments. I have a lot of problems with it. If it's a very long chapter and someone doesn't snip it, then it's very long on your dashboard. It works for, like we said, images.
Yeah.
It's not very good.
No, I'm like there's a special place in hell for people who don't do the read more break on the post when they publish a text post. I totally agree with you. If I need to scroll, or like that super famous post with the shades of the sky, you know which one I'm talking about?
I don't think I know that one.
It's one that gets the shades of the sky in every hour of the day, so it takes like 5 minutes to scroll through, and it became infamous because now people are like even mocking it. It starts with like this title. It says, do you like the shades of the sky? And then you scroll through the whole thing, and then this new post is like, how do you like the shades of the sky? They only put the first picture, and when you scroll, they're like, I bet you thought you were gonna spend like forever scrolling down, but guess what? We're not gonna do this to you. So now it has its own like fandom in a way, you know what I mean? Of like people who are like,
wow, I did not know about that.
I didn't either. I never saw that.
Now you're gonna see it at some point and be like, oh, we heard about you, you little bastard. Yeah. So I'm curious, what sort of plans do you have for the future of the Tumblr/Twitter account? What's coming our way? More of the same, or like, yeah.
So I think I'm pretty much in a steady groove. I'm going to keep, my goal, I guess, is I haven't repeated a lyric for the most part. So My goal is to get through all the lyrics before I repeat any others.
That's a lot of lyrics.
Which, it's a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's so far it feels infinite. I know it's not, but it's like there's so much there. So, and then I don't know if I haven't really thought any bigger beyond just keep the Tumblr going. Just, I maybe eventually do some posts that are right now it's a pretty standard format. It's just a screenshot with a quote from the lyrics, but maybe I'll eventually learn how to make GIFs and start doing more kind of sophisticated Tumblr image files. So we'll see.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
It would be fun. I feel like I'm an imposter of a millennial because I don't feel that technically savvy. I don't know how to make videos. I don't know how to make GIFs. But I can do screenshots and I can use MacBook Preview to put quotes on top of them.
GIFs are my downfall, but
yeah.
Are you gonna, do you accept submissions on Tumblr? Suggestions from people?
I do, yeah. I mean, so what happens is I do accept submissions. Usually someone will either send an idea or they'll create one themselves. Because I'm kind of OCD and I want the site to have its own, have a uniform aesthetic, I'll make it my own. I'll recreate it using the format that I do. Also, I've gotten plenty of people that have submitted great ideas that I've already used. Because, we're all kind of thinking along similar lines, but I've gotten some really good submissions for the site. And sometimes the submissions I get, I'm like, I can't believe I didn't think of that before. In the early days, someone suggested, eventually you'll see my ascendancy over a picture of the mayor on graduation day. And I was just like, how did I not think of that? Where was my brain?
Right there.
Yeah. So it's cool. It's really great to have that interaction with the people that are reading the site and see all the other ways other people think about it.
Now I feel like I need to challenge myself and find something worthy of submission. So stay tuned.
Yes. Please do. Please submit something.
I was thinking of a couple as we were speaking.
Oh yeah? What do you have? Tell me.
Well, actually, I couldn't devote my entire brain to it because we're in a conversation. But I always go to those lines that I know are suffering, that are not the most popular.
Mm-hmm.
I love that that song. I forgot the name of the song. But I was thinking about one of my favorite lines that is, don't modulate the key and not debate with me.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure there's somewhere I can shove it in the musical episode. What a great line!
I did that. I actually did that one with Xander and Anya's song.
Great!
When they're singing and dancing and she's interrupting him, I was like, oh, that's perfect for it. Yeah, any of the ones about singing totally work.
I'm done. That is too perfect.
I don't think... I quit at the top because the one, of course, I always brag about is the one with the... pissed him off until we had a two-party system with the two Slayers, which was a reaction.
Yeah, that was a good one.
I know, I don't think I'm gonna, ever live up to that, so maybe I should just, quit. Because Joss like that as well, so I was like, okay, my work here is done. Goodbye and good night,
nice.
But,
that must have been some good validation, for sure.
Yes, and we still live in an era when, you need an internet validation. That's,
right.
on the border between sad and,
You have to have it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, kind of to work through conclusion, we were wondering if you have any thoughts about the whole Joss thing. We spoke about it at length on our first show.
Yeah.
Because it just happened and we were very, upset. So, any thoughts?
Yeah. So, when I found out about it, I wasn't surprised. I've had doubts about how good of a feminist he really is personally for a long time. And there's plenty of things in Buffy and in all of his other projects that you can point to say, ooh, how good are your feminist politics?
Problematic.
Really? Everything is problematic, and And I'm at peace with that, with knowing that, you know, there's some really amazing, groundbreaking things in Buffy, and there's some really reactionary, regressive things too. And I think if you recognize it and talk about it, that's, you know, that's what's important. We have to say, okay, like the way that race is portrayed in Buffy is pretty bad. It doesn't really ever get better. And there's some gender roles and sexism that bore their ugly heads too. And in Firefly, I think when I maybe started having second thoughts about Joss was I love Firefly, but the kind of like strong libertarian streak that it has in it, as well as the cultural appropriation of all Asian culture, it was just really uncomfortable. So, I mean, as much as I think there's been lots of different things in my life that I've been into that first started with an obsession with the showrunner. So, for instance, I was really into Buffy, and I just thought Joss Whedon was incredible. And I was really into The West Wing, and I thought Aaron Sorkin was a god. I was really into Gilmore Girls, and I thought Amy Sherman Palladino was like the best TV writer ever. But eventually, the more I started to use my critical thinking skills, the more separated my love for the creation became from my thoughts on the creator, because I don't really have those great feelings about Aaron Sorkin like we talked about earlier. Like, there are clues in all of these shows, in all of these pieces of media, especially if they're made by men, that point to weak spots in their feminist thinking, and that point to some problematic aspects. So I think it's totally normal for someone to wonder if it's okay to keep liking Buffy because of knowing what we know about Joss. But Buffy was made by so many other people too. I mean, Marty Noxon, Jane Espenson, Rebecca Rand Kirshner, like all of these people that were part of the show. Not to mention like all of the actors and other writers and other directors who also had a huge part in creating something that meant a lot to a lot of people. So I think it's okay. I think it's perfectly possible to be excited about Buffy and find meaning in it without having hero worship of Joss Whedon.
And that's true not just from like the feminist perspective. You know, we talked about the term fangirl earlier, and I get where the negative aspects are coming from, because I always had issues with the word fan. I think fan sometimes indicates idolization. A fan is someone or something that's being perceived as obsessive. So I use the term all the time, but when I stop and think about it, I much rather use the term supporter. Like, I'm a supporter of this person's work. I'm an appreciator of this person's work. And I think it's just like, it's also like when you say I'm a fan, it's as if you're by default putting yourself beneath that person in the hierarchy of like worth. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm like, if I appreciate your work, that doesn't necessarily mean I think you're better than me. I just think that you might be a better writer than me or a more creative person. So I think in general, like our tendency to get obsessive, and we see it on the internet all the time, and we are obsessive. You know, it has its like pros and cons, and it's always like, as a fan, as a supporter, is always like trying to find that balance.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think it's important to approach everything we love with a critical eye and to use our critical thinking skills, because then it helps you understand the work better and then understand the cultural moment in which that work was created.
Absolutely.
I mean, one of the things that I think of when I make my crossovers with Buffy and Hamilton is, so like I mentioned before, like Buffy had a whiteness problem. Like, that's pretty well documented. Like, there weren't a lot of characters of color, and often when there were Black characters or Latina characters or any characters who weren't white, they were portrayed pretty stereotypically, and sometimes pretty offensively. And one of the things that's beautiful about Hamilton is it's this cast of main characters who are all actors of color, and that's one of the things that's beautiful. It's like telling the story of these founding fathers and these, this very white history, with Black and brown actors and singers, and humanizing them, and giving roles to actors of color where, in Broadway, where sadly that's kind of still white too. So sometimes what I try to do is take some of the characters of color that are on Buffy and give them the better lines from Hamilton to kind of humanize them and like give them a better story than the stereotypical stuff they were thrown at.
That's beautiful. That all aspect. It's interesting, like Broadway in a way. Everything can be better always, and we know that TV is doing way better than like films today when it comes to diversity. But as someone who lives in New York and has been lucky enough to see relatively, a decent number of shows on Broadway, there's definitely more diversity on stage that you would expect, and that's great.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Just the Tonys last year, that was wonderful to see, and it's wonderful to see Hamilton. And Hamilton shouldn't be the exception. Like, that should just be very normal, and maybe eventually it will be. But that is definitely one of the things that's beautiful and important about Hamilton, is that this is a show for Black and brown and Indigenous and people of color actors who deserve to shine in the spotlight.
And even more than that, like Shiri, I know that's something that bothers you. I've seen more than once casts, ensembles that not everybody on them was skinny. You would think you would go to the theater and you'll see someone who's like super skinny in all the roles, but Broadway is different. Like if you're, yes, obviously everybody's still relatively pretty because it's still like, a visual medium, but they don't necessarily like look at weight, which I find great. They look at how capable you are. Yeah,
and I think that's really important. It's good to get out of the very like narrow cisgender white able-bodied kind of standard of beauty and standard of goodness that has been keeping a lot of other people down.
Amen to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shiri, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think this was an amazing conversation. I feel like we can go on talking for like 2 more hours about everything. This was fascinating.
It's been wonderful to talk to both of you.
Yeah.
Well, you should definitely
Lauren, thank you so much for joining us at essentially joining us on what is our listeners that don't necessarily know it, but we're in 3 different time zones. So thank you so much for giving us your Sunday morning.
We made it work. It was wonderful.
Miraculously, we made it work. Yes. And yeah, hopefully we will get to talk to you again, and we can't wait to see what's next for Sunnydale Ham.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and we'll see you there, I guess. We'll be the one retweeting.
Wonderful. I'm willing to wait for it.
That was a very nice touch.
Okay, guys, so that was our little chat with Lauren. She was, like I said, delightful, and we enjoyed her very much. I'm sure you did too. So that's our show for today. I loved it.
I too loved it.
Okay, so as you know, you can listen to us in various platforms. All of them are written down on our info page very nicely. And that's about it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few words because we just launched a Patreon account. As you guys know, we're recording from 2 different continents. It's not the easiest, but we definitely, for as long as we can, we don't want to monetize anything. So we're not pressuring anybody. If you guys want to show your support, be it with millions and millions of dollars or like a single buck for an episode, we'd be happy for any contribution. Our Patreon, we will write it down as well, but it's basically patreon.com/randomfandom.
If you want to support us in other ways, you can always give us a comment, rate us on iTunes, whatever. Or just keep listening. That would be awesome. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye, guys.